Mona Lisa was called Mona for short. She was bright, restless, and always in motion. She raced through the village paths, climbed palm trees, and laughed louder than anyone. But her joy faded whenever her eyes drifted to the sea. The ocean, with its endless horizon and crashing waves, was her nightmare. This fear set her apart in Montu. Montu was a proud village, built on fishing. Every morning, boats returned with nets heavy from the sea. The air smelled of salt and smoke from the fires where fish were dried. People from other villages crossed long distances just to trade with Montu. Their bounty was unmatched, and so was their reputation for keeping the waters safe. The hunters of Montu were more than fishermen, they were guardians. For every school of fish, there was a predator, lurking shark-like beasts with teeth like knives, serpents that coiled around boats, creatures born from the deep. Montu's hunters fought them back, carrying scars as proof of their bravery. Mona's father, Maoli, was the greatest of them all. He had faced monsters that haunted legends. His name carried weight, spoken with pride and respect. To him, the ocean was not only food and trade, it was strength, destiny, and honor. And he wanted Mona to inherit that. She was his eldest, the child he believed could carry his spirit forward. But Mona's fear ran deep. She froze at the shoreline, unable to step closer, the sound of waves quickening her breath. Her mother often shielded her from Mauli's insistence, but he never gave up. In his eyes, fear was weakness. When Mona turned 18, tradition gave her no escape. In Montu, 18 meant adulthood, and adulthood meant facing the sea. That morning, Molly's decision was final. Mona would come with him. Her protests, and even her mother's tears, fell away like pebbles in the tide. The ship that carried them was vast, built for battles on the water. Its sails stretched high, its deck crowded with ropes, nets, and harpoons. Hunters filled the boat with steady hands and sharp eyes, their voices rising in chants as the vessel pushed into open water. The ship carried them far from shore, its heavy sails catching the wind. The hunters moved across the deck with practiced ease, their voices rising in chants that matched the rhythm of the waves. Mona stayed close to the mast, where her father had told her to remain. There, you won't get in the way, he had said. And though she hated the words, she clung to the thick ropes tied there as if they were the only solid thing left in her world. The sea stretched endless and merciless around her. Each rise and fall of the ship made her stomach twist. She wished more than anything to be back on land, her feet planted firmly on sand instead of sliding across wet wood. Then the water shifted. A deep shadow swept under the hull. The waves grew restless, swirling with sudden force. Without warning, the surface split open. From below rose a creature that turned the ocean into chaos. It was massive, like a shark but far larger, its body gleaming with blue scales that caught the sunlight. Rows of jagged teeth flashed as it lunged, striking the side of the ship with a shudder that rattled every board. The hunters roared into action, nets unfurled, harpoons flew, and men rushed to the rails. The boat groaned and tilted under the assault. Spray lashed the deck, drenching Mona's face. She clung harder to the mast, heart slamming in her chest. The air was filled with shouts, wood cracking, and the thunder of waves. The beast rammed the ship again. The deck pitched sharply. Mona's grip slipped. Her hands, wet with seawater, slid down the rope. She tried to catch hold again, but the ship lurched violently, throwing her off balance. The world tilted. The mast spun away from her grasp. She saw her father's hand reaching for her, heard his voice cut through the chaos, but the wall tilted sharply. The mast slipped from her grip. Her feet slid across wet wood, and then she was falling. The sea struck her like stone. Cold swallowed her whole. She sank fast, the ship shrinking above her, the monster circling near. Her lungs burned as she fought for air. Then everything went black. The hunters came back at dusk. Their ship limped into Montu's Bay with torn sails and broken nets. The silence on board heavier than any storm. Faces that once brimmed with pride now carried defeat. Maoli stood at the bow, shoulders stiff, eyes hollow. His daughter had been swallowed by the sea before his very eyes, and there had been nothing he could do. On the shore, the village waited. But they already knew, not long after the ship had vanished over the horizon that morning, Mona's body had washed back to land. Children had been the first to see her, lying pale and still on the wet sand, her chest faintly rising and falling, alive but unmoving. The villagers had carried her quickly to her home, whispering in awe and confusion. By the time the hunters returned, everyone already knew that Mona had survived, but not exactly what happened. So when Mauli stepped onto the shore, he saw not the usual celebration of hunters returning, but a village staring at him with questions in their eyes. Their silence was heavier than their words. One voice finally broke through the crowd. "She is home," a woman said quietly. She washed ashore. She breathed still. Mauli froze. He turned sharply, disbelief etched into his face. "What did you say?" His voice cut like a blade. "Mona, she's not out there. She's home," the woman said again. Mauli ran. His heavy steps pounded across the sand as he pushed past the crowd, rushing toward his house. Meanwhile, the hunters looked at one another, bewildered. They had seen her fall, seen her vanish into the dark. Not even the strongest swimmer could survive long in waters churned by a beast of that size. Mauli's wife was waiting in the doorway. Her hair was loose, her face streaked with tears. The moment she saw him, she broke. She beat her fists against his chest, sobbing, her voice thick with rage and grief. "I told you," she cried. "I told you not to take her. She was not ready, Mauli. She was not ready." Her blows were weak compared to the pain in her words. Mauli did not stop her. He stood still, each strike another weight on his shoulders. His pride had led him to drag Mona into the ocean, to force her into his world. His wife stepped aside, her hand trembling as she pointed toward the mat inside. There lay Mona. Her body was pale, her skin still damp. Her hair clung in tangled waves to her face. Her eyes were closed, and her chest rose only faintly, each breath shallow, fragile. She looked like a shell, washed up by the tide, emptied of its light. Mauli staggered toward her and fell to his knees. For a long time he said nothing. He only looked, his calloused hand hovering above her as though afraid to touch, afraid she would vanish like a dream. Word of Mona's return spread through Montu like wildfire. The villagers filled the air with questions. How had she returned? Who had carried her back? Was it the gods who spared her? Or had the ocean itself refused to keep her? For days, Mona lay still, her breath soft as whispers. Mauli remained by her side, his once proud face marked with guilt. His wife tended to their daughter with gentle hands, brushing her tangled hair. On the third day, as dawn painted the sky gold, Mona stared. Her eyes opened slowly, and she gasped, drawing air as though breathing for the first time. Her mother cried out in joy, clutching her clothes. Mauli reached for her hand, his throat too tight to speak. Relief flooded him, but beneath it a deep unease churned. When Mona's gaze lifted to them, it was different. The fear that once clouded her eyes had thinned. She whispered, her voice hoarse but steady. "I saw it." Her parents looked at her, waiting. "The beast," she said. "It did not want to kill me." The room fell silent. Her words carried weight that unsettled the air itself. Mauli shook his head sharply. "You were in shock. You were drowning. You do not remember." But Mona's eyes did not waver. "I remember. It carried me. It let me go." The village divided quickly. Some believed her, whispering that perhaps the monsters were not mindless destroyers. Others rejected the idea with fear, anger, and scorn. Montu had built its strength on the belief that monsters were enemies. If that was not true, then everything they knew was shaken. Mauli was torn. His pride urged him to silence her words, to protect the tradition he had fought for his whole life, but his guilt over forcing her into the sea pressed on him like a storm cloud. The test came sooner than anyone expected. Days after Mona awoke, the hunters gathered their weapons, preparing for war. Mauli stood among them, harpoon in hand, jaw clenched. The people crowded the shore, hearts hammering, and then Mona stepped forward. Her steps were unsteady, but her face was calm. The fear that once chained her was gone. The hunters shouted for her to step back, but she did not. Her father's voice broke through the noise, fierce and desperate. "Mona!" She turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. They no longer belonged to a frightened girl. The sea split open. The beast rose in full, its body gleaming blue under the sun. Water cascaded off its back in torrents, and its jaws opened wide, rows of teeth flashing like knives. The hunters raised their harpoons, but Mona lifted her hand, not in fear, not in defense. In recognition, the beast stilled, its eyes, black and endless, fixed on her. The waves calmed around it. For a breathless moment, the world was quiet. Then the monster gave a low, rumbling sound, not a roar of rage, but something deeper, almost mournful. With a final sweep of its great fin, it sank back beneath the surface, vanishing into the depths. The hunters stood frozen. Their weapons hung useless in their hands. The villagers gasped, some falling to their knees. Mauli's harpoon slipped from his grasp. His hand trembled as he lowered it. His eyes locked on his daughter. In her he saw not fear, not weakness, but something he had never expected, strength of another kind. Mona turned back to the shore, her face calm. She was not her father's shadow, nor his replacement. She was something new, a bridge between her people and the sea.